Hello. This video is about measuring. Mostly chapter 6 in the book, but throughout the book the notion of measuring the right thing right appears. Here are the major notions I want to discuss here. Validity, repeatability, reproducibility, variation, precision and accuracy, interlinking, voice of customer, voice of process, revisiting those key notions, and measuring the right thing right. Measurement and categorizing are the beginning of knowledge. If you can't categorize things, notions, concepts, phenomena into categories, and if you can't measure the phenomenon, you don't know anything about it, and you certainly cannot improve it or design processes to it that will meet those measurements. To illustrate this fundamental aspect of learning, I'll use a number of simple examples, some of them drawn from history, and I will slowly move towards business context where we will end the video. Let me go back to the 18th century. Navigators crossing the Atlantic from Europe to the Americas could most of the time measure quite accurately latitude. Equator, how far are you from the equator? Considering the angle with the sun and other celestial bodies, that's relatively easy to find. But longitude was a very big problem. At some point, a complete fleet was lost by a 60-kilometer mistake in dead reckoning. And the Royal Society, in fact, the Queen, created the longitude board with a prize to anyone who could develop a measurement system, an accurate measurement system that would allow ships to know where they are. Dead reckoning is about, this is where we were, this is the road we've gone through, this is the time span, and consider all the factors that affect your location, and say, now we are here. Complex methods based on celestial bodies and tables would lead to approximations. Dangerously inaccurate approximation, deadly inaccurate approximations at times. Now, an obvious solution is if you know the exact time where you are and the exact time at your point of origin at a given moment in time, angles, at noon, this is noon here, it's 3 o'clock over there, the angles can be calculated and you know exactly your longitude. But then you have to measure time. Here and there. And of course, taking a clock on board is fairly easy, but a pendulum, you can imagine, with winds, angles, and all the phenomena of temperature, humidity, pressure that will affect this, of course, results in accuracy. And as those trips were fairly long, the accuracy increases and the error factor increases. At some point, you just don't know where you are within 100 kilometers, more or less. So the prize money, there was a longitude board and prize money was offered. And the person who, oddly enough, the person who developed this thing, who won, in the end, won most of the prize, was John Harrington, a carpenter, of all things. He was a very meticulous man, and he developed several versions. And in fact, I will suggest a reading if you're interested. It's a fascinating reading in its own right, and it does tell you the importance of measurement. The old method looks like this, and he built a clock. He developed bimetal wires that would not be affected by temperature. And in the series of versions that he developed, of course, he ended up with something like this in the end, going through things like that, and won a lot of money in the process, and a lot of frustrations, as you will see in the book, which I highly recommend to you. Reading that will make you aware of the importance of measurement. And of course, time is not nowadays the hardest thing to measure, but very often we end up measuring time, because now we can measure it And we tend to measure what is easily measurable rather than what we need to measure, because we don't know how to measure it. If it's intangible, especially in service, especially in complex service, we quickly end up with intangibles. And we tend to say, well, let's measure the time span. Of course, time is always important, but it is never the only factor, and certainly not always the most important factor either. From this example, let me go to a very simple example. A golden brown toast. In the morning, I would like a golden brown toast. If I go to a restaurant, I ask for a golden brown toast. I know what it is. But it's not enough for them to ask the cook to say, hey, a golden brown toast. I know what it is, but someone else will come after me and ask for a golden brown toast, and he has something else in mind. So we need to measure color, chromometry. And we need to measure in a way that is repeatable and reproducible. That, certainly for me, no, that's a burnt toast. Few people would like that, I think. Many people would like this. To me, it's a little too dry. To me, that's a golden brown toast. This is probably a little too pale for me. Let's develop a measurement. Can color be measured? Of course. Not that I'm saying that all restaurants should measure the color of their toast, but just for purpose of discussion and illustration. Of course, if you have a color grid and you have a toast, then you can rate the color. You can say, well, this is a 15, this is the 23, 34, if you have a scale. And of course, you need to make some assumptions. You know, the color is not even here. Many variables will impact the process and the resulting color. Bear in mind that we are measuring for the purpose of making sure that whatever output we put out meet the customer requirement, the voice of the customer, and to develop a process that will reliably deliver within the voice of customer. So what are the processes of making bread and toaster? What are the variables that impact the color of bread? Well, the bread itself, there are many variables here in terms of the water content, the thickness of the slice, the taper of the slice. If you make toast, you know that the two slices at the end, you know, they're not tapered, they're not parallel. So you will typically burn the extreme. So what else? Where do you keep it? Do you keep it in the fridge? Do you keep it? The temperature of the bread when you start preparing it is certainly very important as well. And is it dry? Has it been? When did you buy it? In the end, all these variables impact the color of the bread. So you can get a complete grid from totally white to totally black, get a rating system, and to make sure that your system is valid, you need to check with the customer. Does he agree that this toast meets his requirement? And you need two persons applying the same measurement system, coming up with the same value. And the same person seeing the same toast twice, giving it the same value. This is what we call repeatable, reproducible. And it can be tested, of course. You can get a bunch of these toasts, put numbers in the back, and you can test a stack of 30, have the same person rate them, and have different person rate them until you get it just right. If it is important, of course. If you've decided, if you've looking at your strategic analysis, you found that this is critical to satisfaction, you need to measure it that way. And come up with a voice of customer. When my bread, before the customer even sees it, is between 63 and 87, it will meet the voice of the customer. And then we need to check if the customer indeed says, yes, it does meet my requirement. We call this, by the way, interlinking. Internal measurements with external measurements. The advantage and the strength of internal measurements: immediate feedback. Not in 2 hours when you don't know who did the toast, what variables were involved. Immediate feedback is key to learning. When it comes to measurement and measurement system, garbage in, gospel out. Let me repeat that. Garbage in, gospel out. We measured it. This is the real result, the value. It has been proven. Once you believe that, you do not question this belief again. It becomes ingrained, unchallengeable, it sticks, and this is how we create superstitious organization. Bad measurement systems are deadly for learning. So we are doing this in order to get the settings of the toaster right, and maybe change the technology if the settings alone cannot deliver within the voice of the customer. Various toasters will have various controls. We are interested in having an owner manual for the operators so that they know how to set it for various type of results that they want. But then there's various technologies, as you see, each of which has its own variable, its own risk, its own vulnerability, its own bad habits. You see that, this is better to avoid burning. If you see it, if it's about to burn, you'll stop it. Here you have you have certainly the temperature, but you have the speed as well to adjust. We are interested in finding a customer requirement and being able to measure it, set target values, and develop settings for our process, or develop a process that can meet the desired settings. Now, let's go to something more intangible. Taste. Can taste be measured? Well, mayonnaise. For me, good or bad. So, to the operator, make good mayonnaise is probably not enough of an instruction, of an operator's manual, and of a process. So, you need, as a producer, to develop a better understanding of the underlying variables and settings that will lead me to the conclusion, good or bad. And that will lead a European or an Asian to the conclusion, good or bad. We're built differently, we react differently, and various market segments, of course, react very differently as well. You can see how this is critical to positioning, segmenting, positioning, creating superior value proposition. Mayonnaise, by the way, 10 dimensions of textures, 14 dimensions of flavor, divided into 3 categories. Appearance, here's a number of variables. Aromatics, basic taste, salty, sour, sweet. And these can all be measured, each on a 15-point criteria. Can you believe that? When I first saw the way they did this, at first I couldn't. That sounds. And you need it to be repeatable and reproducible. 2 experts tasting it will come up with the value of, for example, Gerber beef 2, Whitney's vanilla yogurt 7.5 on the 15-point scale. Do you need to measure it to that level of accuracy? Well, you may, if the market segment you're targeting will make a difference and will pick differently on the shelves. You need to do it. Thus, the importance of measurement systems. Repeatability, reproducibility, and validity. Correlate, interlink internal measurement with external measurements. Let's go to subtler stuff. Pain. Do we need to measure pain? Well, if you're controlling the level of painkiller that you're injecting or that you're giving to someone, you need to know pain. And not everyone has the vocabulary to describe the pain that he or she is feeling. And not everyone feels pain the same way. So here's a way where someone with low verbal ability could rate. That's a facial expression, it's quite universal. And certainly relatively, when someone goes from here to there, you understand that they are feeling more pain and that you should adjust the pain medication. So again, you want to measure the customer reaction, through a metric and adjust the process of injecting and the quantity of medication that you're injecting to produce the desired outcome. Let's move from this to a more business environment, if you like. Call centers. You don't see the person talking to you. So it all goes through your ear. It goes through innuendos, words, tones of voice, meanings, interpretation of meanings. After a call is done, as a customer, you can rate the call that you got. You need, if you're the provider, if you manage the call center, you need to be able to rate it the same way. Before you ask, you need, at the moment where you hang the phone, where you hang up, where the operator hang up, the customer service representative rather, he should be able to say this is an 8.3. And if someone calls the customer right after as a follow-up, after sales survey or after contact survey, he or she should come up with the same number. Or at least the two numbers, the two values should be correlated, interlinked. Now you can get the feeling that the process to develop that would be like what we described for the mayonnaise. What makes a given market segment rate a call a given way? What are their expectations? Politeness, courtesy, accuracy, good responses, attitude, and so on. This is a call center here. We're in India, and this is a rating system. I just browsed on Google and I found this one where someone would be listening at the other end and be rating the call. Was there a welcome greeting? Opening smile. Hey, good morning. How are you today? A closing smile. Hey, have yourself a good one. Are you here? Of course, this will depend on the region of the country. In England, this would not fly very well. Good morning, love. How are you today? That might fly better. In the US, it wouldn't. Again, market segments, and it gets to be more intangible as words, tones of voice have local connotation that you need to understand if it is important to differentiate your service. And much of the service that's done over the phone is undifferentiated. A call center that is perceived overwhelmingly to be more courteous will have a distinct advantage over the others. This is, I just Googled that up. First contact resolution, that's quite important in many call centers. If you refer me to 4 people, I have to repeat my story 4 times, especially if I have to give my account number 4 times. I will not be very happy. Of course, waiting time in queue, back to time, that's easy to measure. It's not enough. You need to go to the soft stuff. The hard stuff is the soft stuff, again. Always interlinking. What's the customer's reaction? What's our internal value learning rating? Do they correlate? If our internal value goes up and the customer's satisfaction goes down on some dimension, we are missing something. Let's go back to the phenomenon we're trying to understand. Define it better, find the critical element in there, and then find a way to measure it internally that will correlate with customer. For example, our customer satisfaction rating here and time on hold, obviously you would expect that. But this, the steepness of the curve would be very different from one market segment, from one regional area to another. One final example. Let's take a Japanese steakhouse, like the Benihana's, the Kobe, the Kyoto, and all the others that exist. What is it that you want to produce here that will get the customer to be pleased, to be delighted, to spread positive word of mouth, to become, to be an advocate for your service, and to take his friend and even the customers of competitors to come over. It's entertainment and fun. Of course, good tastes, smells, exotic experience. How do you measure that? Well, this guy seems to be having fun. I wouldn't bet as much on this guy, but I don't know this guy. Can you measure the level of customer satisfaction at a table? Of course, you can measure the tips. That's an indication, but then some people tip anyway, just not to look cheap. They will tip. If I were a manager and going around and I've got, say, 10 tables like this, could I develop a rating system where I find that the experience of this table is great, 8.3, the experience of that table not so great is a 6.5. By looking at their faces, looking at the table, at what they're eating, the ambiance, the looks. My bet is that I could, but it's only useful if the manager of the evening shift or the weekend shift can come up with the same metric. We observe, let's say I go around discreetly, and the two other managers go around as well. They rate the table. We compare our values. And until we get it right, we don't see the criteria, we don't interpret it the same way. Once we get it right, did the customer rate it the same way? And when I say 8.3, 6.8, if I compare the ratings of these tables, will I get the same type of differences? And if one evening, after doing 4 rounds, say, I find that my value is lower than the night before, will I reflect and observe the same phenomena in my customer surveys? And if I find that Joe's table and Paul's table, I mean the cooks, one night, Joe is really up and Paul is down, and the converse the next night, I should observe with my customer survey the same result. If I do, I am interlinked, and the more closely interlinked, the tighter the correlation, the better. Why do I need to do that? For learning. Detect early something that is drifting or shifting. Find out why. Learn something about your process. Train. The idea is not to catch Paul off guard and to get the hit on Paul, but to find that, this seems to work. You see this table is going, Paul's services are going up and his rating are going up, and we find that he's doing something that may explain it. Well, let's test it. Let's ask Joe to start doing the same thing and see if it works. Key to learning, experimenting, is having a measurement system that is valid, repeatable, reproducible, interlinked with customer satisfaction. Let me conclude this with a number of definitions. You hopefully can take a screenshot or have copies of the slide to review this. The first bunch here is what's uncertainty, risk, words that we use all the time without good definition. And I'll give you the source of some of these quotes. Douglas Hubbard, How to Measure Anything. Uncertainty is the lack of complete certainty, existent of more than one possibility. Risk is a state of uncertainty where some of the possibilities will have consequences, negative consequences. Measurement, a set of probability assigned to the various possibilities. Measurement of risk, again, probability with assessment of the consequences, probabilities of the consequences. And a failure mode is a set of variable settings that will produce a failure. And I refer you to failure mode and effect analysis later on. A measurement is a quantitatively expressed reduction of uncertainty based on one or more observation, empirical. Not just what I thought, and it does start with thinking. At some point you need to observe. And clarification chain. If it's a matter, it is detectable and observable. If it is detectable, it can be detected as an amount or a range. And if it can be detected as a range, then it can be measured. It is that universal. Finally, measurement errors, systematic errors, accuracy, random error, and precision. Precision and accuracy are important notions here. And I leave you with these 3 takeaways. Oh, by the way, this is the reference to the book, Hubbard. Again, a very interesting reading for measurement. And my key learning here, don't look for what is easily measured. Find a way to measure what needs to be measured for business success, for learning and improvement, and beating competition, which is the name of the game. No measurement, no learning. When it comes to measurement, garbage in, gospel out. Poor measurements create superstitious organizations. Quick and accurate feedback is one of the keys to learning. Interlinking is a key to getting the right metrics. There you go. Thank you for your attention today. Goodbye.